Okay, so I chose this problem because I think it's got an interesting premise or an idea behind it, which is that we have to write a story for these problems that help us find the value of n. So in other words, how could we solve each of these, and how could we create a story that helps us think about this equation? I'm going to start with b because I think it's a little bit easier to deal with. Really, this is saying n over 2 equals 16. That's saying n, some number, divided by 2 gives us 16. All right, that's the same thing, just written in a different way. So we could write a story that talks about this situation. We have lots of options. This division statement could be thought of as taking a group of something, maybe a basket of chocolate or a container of money, and then splitting it, right? This division can be thought of taking something and then splitting it into two groups because we're dividing by 2. And then within each group, once we split it up, we have 16 there. So maybe we had a basket of chocolate, we split it into 2 groups, and then each group had 16 pieces of chocolate. The question would be, the story would be, well, how much chocolate was originally in the basket, right? Because really, something divided by 2. Both baskets now have an even amount, the same amount, 16 each. Originally, there had to be 32, so n would equal 32. So any story right here could reflect division in that way, saying that you take something and split it into 2 groups. And then once you know how much is in each group, you can figure out how much was in the original pile of chocolate or whatever. Now here in part A, this is saying negative 4n equals 24. That represents negative 4 times n, right? When you see a variable, a letter next to a constant, like a number, that's showing multiplication. So here, negative 4 times something gives us negative 24. Well, I think a nice way of looking at this is loss or finance or debt. What you could say is that you're losing $4, right, every week. Maybe you're spending it on food, or maybe you're spending it on something, you're trying to sell it and you can't, but under some story or some scenario, you could talk about how you're losing $4 each week. And then you know you've lost a total of $24. So this negative sign here could represent the total loss in some situation, maybe with money or something else. And this could be the rate of loss, right? How much are you losing? Rate of loss. So the finding n could say, well, if you know how much you've lost in total and what the rate of loss is, for how long have you been losing that money? Maybe it's a story problem about how much you're losing each week. So then you could say, well, n would have to equal 6, right? If every week if every week my loss is negative 4, and in total, at the end, that loss is represented by negative 24, that would be a 6-week cycle, because 6 times negative 4 gives us negative 24. So those are just some general ideas for how a story could be built around these problems. Although I'm excited to see other ideas and other ways of writing stories that fit these scenarios.